I'm Sean Hughes, and in this video I'm going to be sharpening this chisel to 17 degrees. This was an idea that was born out of a video I watched from Rob Korsman, in which he sharpened his chisels to 17 degrees. And the reason that he did that was because when he was cutting out the waste material, in softwood at least, he found that by using a 17 degree chisel, he had less tearing in the wood fibres. We have a set of maple chisels, and they're sharpened in the traditional way with a 25 degree primary bevel and then a secondary 30 degree cutting bevel. So I went out and I bought a spare chisel identical to this one beneath it, and I thought I'm going to sharpen this one to 17 degrees. And we're going to find out just how difficult it is to do it and just how easy some people make it look. We need to put a primary bevel on this, so this is the tool to do the job. It works really slowly, and because it works so slowly, with this filled up with water, it doesn't heat up the blade, so it doesn't actually soften the metal because it doesn't play around with the tempering. So the first thing that we're going to do is dress this wheel to make it completely flat. Now the wheel's been dressed and it's nice and smooth and flat, now we can cut a primary bevel. So I've changed this from the normal 25 degrees to 17 degrees and I've locked it off. And this is the jig that we're going to use in order to set the tool rest on the grinder.
And that in itself presents me with some problems.
Here, this is set to be 17 degrees to this wheel, but you can see that by the time we round this section off here, this top section is going to come down, it's going to change the angle. We're just cutting off this crown section here, and effectively this area here is going to work its way forward as we put on that new bevel.
As we grind this section off here, we're going to be moving further and further and further down, and that's going to be changing this angle. So we're going to have to reset the angle again once we've sort of half ground it.
And sure enough, you can see that little bit of light at the front. I've got to change the angle of this again. So we started off with that, and then by the time we ground off the crown portion of it there, we end up in that situation. But what's actually happened is that we have moved this bit down, and that's changed the angle. So we've gone higher than the 17. This is probably, I don't know, about 2 degrees higher, so probably closer to 19. So I've readjusted the height in order to move this down, and by moving it down, I'm changing the angle of the blade. So this should give me a true 17, but this will be hollow ground. So we've now finally got this set at 17 degrees, and I had to do it by just blocking it up with a piece of wood. The very back is still touching, so we're not actually at 17 degrees yet. So by changing this and reducing this, I'm changing the angle. You can just see that light at the front there. So it's going to be cutting on the very top of the chisel. Using all of the wheel. And you can see that we've hollowed out from about that point to that point there, but we still have this tip to get to. But it's getting incredibly thin. This is going to be so easy to damage. And you can actually see there's a little bit of light at the front, proving that it's not touching. So if we put the stone back into the water and put the wheel back on again, we ground off. So we've ground all of this, and we're now up to just 0.5 millimetre onto the end. So this is that very last 0.5 millimetre on the very end. So now we'll take it back and we're going to put it on the digital angle finder and see how close we are to 17 degrees. So we've managed to get it set to 17.1 degrees. So this one has got a primary bevel of 25 degrees and a secondary bevel of 30. And this one is being ground with the whole bevel at about 17.1. Neither this Veritas jig or this Lee-Nielsen jig is of any use to me at the moment, because neither of them will allow me to get the angle that I want, because effectively I have to go too far forward in order to make the angle, because obviously it's this wheel that makes contact, and obviously the further out you go the shallower the angle gets, and the further it comes back the steeper it gets. So I'm going to have to do this by hand. And you can see that we've got a little section polished at the front and a little section polished at the back, and the rest of it's hollow. So that's going to be good for me. And so the next thing for me to do is to put this onto the Waterstone and see if I can't polish out those 1000 grit marks. So the back isn't scraping. And I'm locking my wrist, just like you see in all the videos. That's now 17 degrees. I'm going to strop it to get that final polish, but I'm only going to drag it backwards. And there you can clearly see those two very highly polished surfaces, one at the back and one at the front, and then we've got this hollow bit in the center. But that is as close as I'm going to get to 17 degrees. And that's a 17-degree chisel. If we look at them both sort of side on. Let's see how it works. Chop all of it out, just half at a time, like you would. And I'm not going to bother to turn it over because this isn't actually a real joint, but we're close enough now where I can let's take a bit more off, a bit more off here. And now I'm going to go actually into the scribe line itself. And again, I'm actually on the scribe line now. Oops, a bit more. Okay, that's bang on. So now that's the finish that we get, and you can see there that was the finish with the 30-degree chisel. So you can see that kind of, you know, it's tearing the wood a little bit. So let's now try the same thing but with the 17. I'm going to treat it exactly the same way as I treated the other one. And already, I don't know if you can see this, if I can get this to stick to my finger there, that looks like a strip of steel. You can clearly see that tiny little final bevel has shattered and broken off. There's a little bit sticking up there. So in conclusion, what do we think of a 17-inch chisel?
Well, as you can see, clearly I couldn't get it to work. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. It certainly worked for Rob Korsman, but it didn't work for me. Would it be the quality of the steel? I don't know. I mean, these are maple chisels, so they're not the cheapest chisels out there, but by the same token, they're certainly not the most expensive. But I tend to think it's probably got something to do with user error. I would imagine that Rob Korsman is probably being a little bit more gentle with the use of his chisel than I was being with mine. But final thoughts on the subject. I think if a chisel is got a tip that's that fine and that brittle and that easy to break, probably not something I'd want to use in the workshop on a regular basis. Might be alright for the specialist that has that high grade of skill, something that certainly I don't possess, but generally speaking, it's not for me. Anyway, I hope you found this useful, and thanks for watching.